Hello, homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm. Thanks for joining me in my kitchen. Today, I am making a recipe that is basically an Indian curry of peas, potatoes, and mustard greens. And the original recipe calls for spinach, and I have made it that way. But I happen to have a lot of these beautiful Japanese spinach mustards right now. And so I thought it would be really fun to try it with some of that instead. I am not a fan of mustards in general, so you can grow mustard greens. They're very easy to grow in the spring. They often bolt and go to seed, and then you have them for the rest of your life because they reseed everywhere. I don't really love things with a bitter bite to them, and so not a big fan of mustards, not a real big fan of radishes, don't really even love horseradish. However, these Japanese mustard greens, and I'll put the name up on the screen for you and where I got them, are really lovely. They're a really great, quick, easy, early season crop, and they don't have the extreme bite of most mustards. They're very, very mild. They are much more like spinach. My spinach crop this year was kind of an utter failure. I have the hardest time germinating spinach. I don't know what it is. Every year I struggle with it. And this year I got an okay germination, not great, probably 50%. Planted it out, it was looking beautiful, and I have been absolutely devastated by leaf miners this year. And I didn't spray as early as I should have. There are several organic sprays that work good on leaf miners, including spinosad and pyrethrins, and I wasn't paying close attention, and it got away from me, and the crop is basically an utter failure at this point. We also got a week of very hot weather, which made all of it bolt, which didn't help. So yeah, it's been a challenge. So no spinach in this recipe. I'm using mustard greens instead. And if you struggle with spinach, this might be a good crop for you. They freeze beautifully. I've used them in one of my other Indian recipes from much earlier in my YouTube channel, and I'll put a link to that as well. But a really lovely alternative to spinach if you struggle with spinach. It also has potatoes in it. This is clearly a store-bought potato because we are definitely not in potato season. It's May. And then frozen green peas. So this is a really simple pantry staple type recipe, inexpensive. It does have a tomato sauce topping on it that has chili flakes and mustard seeds in it. Normally you would make that with a fresh tomato. Again, May, no fresh tomatoes. I happen to have some frozen tomato pulp that I had used for romesco sauce, and I had some extra. It's been languishing in my freezer, so it was a good excuse to use it. I think a small can of tomato sauce would probably work just as well. So there's lots of ways of getting around not having a fresh tomato. I could have bought a fresh tomato at the grocery store, but it would have been absolutely horrible if I'd bought one in May. And so I just made an alternative and did something else. This is a really nice alternative if you have been eating kind of heavy and you want a little bit of a lighter meal. We are clearly not vegetarian. It doesn't take very long to look at my YouTube channel to figure that out. However, we do eat vegetarian on a fairly frequent basis. I would say at least one meal a week is vegetarian. And sometimes I just really want to lighten up and have something that is a lot lighter and not so meat heavy. And so this is a great alternative. Join me in my kitchen. Let's get started.
Am I the only one who finds it ironic that organic potatoes come with plastic wrapping that you end up having to take forever to pull off and then throw out? Wildly frustrating. If there is one piece of produce that I could advise you to buy organic when you can't afford to buy anything else organic, it is potatoes. Conventional potatoes are basically toxic when they're small, and they're only less toxic when they're bigger because they've diluted themselves by the size. So yeah, potatoes are definitely worth buying organic. I'm just cutting these into bite-sized pieces. Really, it's just whatever size you like. There is no right or wrong here, just whatever you want to eat on a fork. And then we're going to get those on the stove and boil them for about 12 minutes until they're tender. And it's really important when you're cooking potatoes to salt the water. Potatoes really are terribly bland unless they're well salted, and so I didn't measure it, but add a good dose of salt there. Strain those off and just set them aside. They go back into the dish later. This is one of my very last storage onions. A little bit worse for wear, but not too bad, all things considered. You'll see there is quite a bit of trim on this. And of course, the inside is well sprouted. And I didn't worry about getting every single sprout out of this, but I did pick out the ones that were easy to get to. And the recipe called for about a cup of chopped onion. I'm guessing that I probably had a little bit more than that. I feel like at least 50% of every video I've ever done has me chopping an onion. It is just the basis for all food. I feel really bad for people that are allergic to onion, and I've known 2 of them. You want a 1/4 cup of oil to cook these onions in, and I'm actually using some onion oil from a previous video, and so I saved the oil, filtered it out, and have been using it in things since, and it's a perfect addition to this particular recipe. 1.25 teaspoons of salt, or maybe 1.5 teaspoons. Get those going. We're going to saute these for about 5 minutes. And I am never good at having everything ready before I start cooking, and so while those are cooking, I'm going to get my ginger ready. I decided, I use canned ginger sometimes or jarred ginger. Today I decided to use fresh, and this is just on a rasp grater. Always wash your rasp grater right after you use it. It will save you tons of time later. It's worth stopping and doing that. And then this is the mustard spinach. And I am just stripping the leaves off just like you would if it was kale or Swiss chard. And then giving everybody a good bath. Much easier to wash once the stems are off. And then I'm just tearing it up into pieces. I really should have chopped this finer. You'll see later it's a little bit stringy in the final dish because I was too lazy to chop these all into 1-inch pieces. My colander was full of potatoes, so I'm using my lettuce spinner to strain off the mustard. Checking on those onions, they're looking good. Ready to add in some garlic, our ginger, and then a little bit of turmeric. And you just want to cook that until it smells good. So about a minute. And you can see I'm getting just a little bit of stickage there, but that's going to release immediately just from the moisture in the greens. And so no matter how dry these are, they're going to release a lot of moisture when they hit that hot temperature. And I'm always amazed at how quickly greens cook down. I mean, this fills this entire pot, and by the time the dish is done, they seem like a minor element in the overall dish. So giving those a good stir, trying to get that onion up off the bottom, and to unstick anything that might be stuck on the bottom. And this is after just probably a minute. They've wilted down pretty good. Adding in some frozen peas. I didn't bother to thaw these, I just threw them in. And here's that tomato sauce that I had left over from Romesco. So it's just unflavored, cooked down tomatoes. And it's frozen, so I'm getting it thawed out in the microwave while the rest of this cooks. Starting a little rice. I'm using basmati here, but whatever you feel like is fine. You can see how much those greens have cooked down. I'm adding the last of the oil, 2 tablespoons to this pan. Tablespoon of chili flake, tablespoon of brown mustard seed, half a teaspoon, I think, of salt. Check the recipe, it's in the description. And I'm just heating that until the mustard seed starts to pop. And then to that, I'm adding a couple teaspoons of tomato paste. And I'm just spreading that out so that it's dispersed in that oil. And then in goes our tomato puree. There's a little bit of a chunk in the middle of that that's still frozen, but it doesn't last very long. And we're just going to stir all of that together and reduce it just a little bit to make a really lovely sauce to go over the top of this. Our greens are cooked. Throwing the potatoes back in just long enough to warm them up. That sauce is nicely reduced down. And it should be a little bit of oil in there. Our rice is finished and we're ready to serve it up. And this is a surprisingly filling, satisfying meal, given that it's vegetarian. It's really quite delicious. You can see I didn't quite cut those greens up enough. They're a little bit stringy, a little bit hard to get out of the pan. Delicious, but a little awkward. And then we're going to add just a little bit of our beautiful tomato oil sauce. And then a little bit of yogurt. And this is obviously optional. If you wanted to keep this vegan, you could just leave this out. But it really does add a nice element of tang and creaminess to this whole dish. So there you have it, tribe. Really delicious vegetarian weeknight meal. Comes together quickly, budget friendly. Give it a try. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and subscribe. And please share it with your friends. I have new content coming out every week.